The sun was just beginning to bleed across the rugged New Mexico horizon when Eli Broderick rode into town with the swagger of a man who believed nothing in the world could ever truly challenge him, a man hardened by whiskey, cheap victories, and the arrogance born from never having met someone capable of pushing back. He strutted through the dusty main street like it belonged to him, tipping over a water bucket here, spitting tobacco there, and smirking as townsfolk shifted away from him out of both genuine fear and the weariness of knowing. His temper flared like gunpowder at the slightest spark, and on this particular morning, that spark came in the form of a quiet, slender Apache man standing outside the general store, minding his own business, adjusting the leather strap on a small handmade satchel. The Apache stranger, whose name Eli did not bother to learn, wore a plain buckskin shirt, his long dark hair tied with a simple strip of hide, and though his eyes were soft, they held a depth of calm resilience that Eli mistook for weakness, and so with a sneer that sliced through the silence, Eli shoved the Apache man aside, knocking him to the ground, laughing loudly as he barked something about savages and knowing their place, while the townsfolk winced but remained silent, for nobody wanted to challenge Eli. Nobody except maybe the Apache himself, who slowly rose from the dirt, dusted his sleeves, and simply looked at Eli, not with hatred, not with fear, but with the steady, unbroken gaze of a man who had decided that what happened in this moment would not be forgotten. And though he said nothing, his presence alone unsettled Eli, who barked again for him to walk away before I give you a reason not to, only for the Apache to finally speak in a calm tone that carried more weight than a revolver being cocked, telling Eli that disrespect always returns to the one who started it, sometimes softly, sometimes like thunder. And then he turned and walked away, leaving the entire street frozen in attention so heavy even the horses felt it. But Eli, puffed up and stupid with ego, shouted after him, threw a rock at his back, and laughed like he had just won something important, unaware that the Apache belonged to a clan renowned for their warrior bloodline, unaware that the man he mocked was the younger brother of a respected leader, and unaware most of all that the insult would not simply fade into the wind but travel miles into the mountains, where warriors still trained under ancient codes, where honor was not a word but a living force that demanded balance. The day passed, the sun sank, and Eli returned to his lonely cabin deep in the pines, bragging to himself about how he had put that redskin in his place, drinking from a bottle until the fire blurred and the night thickened. But as sleep crept in, his mind wandered uneasily to the stranger's stare, a quiet stare that seemed to carry a promise. Morning came harsh and grey, with wind rattling the shutters, and Eli woke with a pounding head, stepping outside to fetch water from the creek only to freeze mid-stride. For perched upon his fence post was a single black-feathered arrow, an Apache war symbol of warning, not yet punishment, but a declaration that someone had been wronged. Eli cursed under his breath, spun around scanning the trees, but saw nothing except the shifting shadows of the pine needles, and though fear crawled at the edges of his chest, he laughed it off, snapping the arrow and tossing it aside, unaware that someone unseen watched the gesture with narrowed eyes. The entire day felt strange, as though the forest itself was holding its breath, and though Eli tried to busy himself chopping wood or checking his traps, he could not shake the sensation that he was being followed, studied, measured like prey by a hunter who knew every rock, every brush of wind, every bird call in the mountains. And that night, when the coyotes howled more sharply than usual and the forest suddenly fell silent afterward, Eli's nerves frayed even more, yet he still clung to the foolish belief that he was safe, that no Apache would dare retaliate against a white man so close to town. But at dawn, when he stepped out with his rifle, heart pounding from a restless night, he stopped dead in his tracks because the world around him had changed in a way that sucked the air straight out of his lungs. On the ridge above his cabin, stretching in both directions like a living wall of vengeance, stood at least 100 Apache warriors, painted for war, weapons drawn, their bodies silent and perfectly still, their eyes fixed on him with a fury older than the mountains themselves. They didn't shout, didn't rush in, didn't threaten, because they didn't need to. Their presence alone crashed into Eli like a hammer, shattering the illusion that he had ever controlled anything. And in that terrifying moment when the warriors began slowly descending the ridge, their footsteps synchronized like thunder rolling across the earth, Eli understood that he had crossed a line no man should ever cross. That one careless moment of cruelty had woken a storm powerful enough to swallow him whole. And as he stumbled backward toward his cabin, gripping his rifle with trembling hands, he realized that he was not just facing revenge, but an entire code of honor, older than the country itself, a code that demanded he pay for the insult in full, no matter the cost. His pulse hammered in his ears. His breath came in sharp bursts, and as the warriors continued their slow, deliberate approach, he whispered a panic prayer. Not to be spared, he already knew that might not be possible, but to at least understand why his world had collapsed overnight. And deep inside, beneath the fear and the shaking, he knew the truth. The Apache he bullied had never been weak, never alone, never without protection. And now Eli was about to learn the bitter consequences of attacking the wrong man. This was only the beginning, a storm rolling in with unstoppable force. And as the warriors closed in, their faces unreadable, Eli realized that if he wanted to know what happened next, if he wanted to survive long enough to tell the story, he would need something he had never possessed before: respect, humility, and the courage to face the consequences of his own actions. And if you're eager to know how Eli's fate unfolds and how the Apache decide his punishment, make sure you stay with the story and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter, because things are about to escalate in ways he never could have imagined.